In this video, I would like to talk about trigger adjustments on MG2. You would need to take the grip off, as most of the screws are hidden behind the grip, inside the grip. So the components of the trigger are the hammer that held by the release lever over here. First release lever. There's a second release lever that activated by our trigger, where the disconnect pushes on a lever here. So when you fire the first shot and the slide goes back, when the slide goes back, it pushes on this disconnect plate that disconnects our trigger, and that's why it stays in the cocked position. It's not released because our disconnect here disconnected our trigger from the lever, and when we release the trigger, it now connected back, and now we can make a second shot. Okay, so adjustments here. First of all, take this holder support off. Just push the pin out. Just held by the pin, so it's easy to work with. Okay, so there's a screw up front here. The older MG2 has another screw, a dead travel screw up front. Now the MG2 EVO, they moved adjustment to the hole here. So it's a canonical screw here. This is the dead travel here screw. So there's first two, the 1 and 2 here. Then there's a travel screw over here on the right. That's how far you have the movement of the trigger, overall movement. And then there is this plunger that consists of two parts. The plunger, that's big screw up front here. It moves obviously in and out. You can screw it in and out. And also inside there's a small screw that sets the force that push this. The plunger has a ball, has a spring inside and a ball, and that screw adjusts the pressure on that ball, and that ball relates then to the pressure of your release. So this is where you adjust your 2-pound trigger weight and stuff like that. And those two springs, I adjusted with the lever here with this screw. When you turn this screw in, you push on this lever and it moves it down, and obviously applies more force. So this is more a travel force, not a release force, but the initial first stage force. So word of caution, what I found is the reset trigger screw sometimes screwing you up. So because you might start adjusting things, and if this disconnect is not engaging properly, this will screw up your adjustment. So you might want to turn it counterclockwise, maybe a little bit 90 degrees, and then you can adjust it later. So I'm gonna release this. And also the dead travel, also if it's set up really tight, then you would be measuring the force against that screw. So you want to move that back a little bit. And this is the if you're adjusting it for the first time. Obviously, if you already made some adjustments, then it's probably in the proper position. So I'm just going to move it back so my dead travel is free. It moves enough back. So that screw up in the back, as I said before, this is your overall travel. So if we'll unscrew it, and the best way to play with the trigger, just move those screws and see what they do. So you move it back a little bit, and now my travel my travel overall is big. As you see, it is not touching that screw, and that because it doesn't release all the way forward is because this screw now holding me up. So they kind of interconnect. So if you see, I'm releasing this screw and it will touch. Okay, Now we're seeing it touching it, right? So now the travel is much bigger. See how much travel I have? Again, it's a personal preference. You might not want to have the travel as this much, but this is where you're adjusting the travel. So watch out for this front screw. So if I don't want that much travel, I will move it, and you can adjust it later. This is one of the things that you should adjust the last, is that this front screw, the release one, and that travel and overall travel should be the last ones. So I would loosen them up and then work on the pressure first, on the release overall. And to measure the release, you'll need something like this tool or a weight of 2 pounds, so you can hang it on the trigger and measure your release. So what you want to do, you want to make sure that you're getting that that lever touches the ball. So that lever moves forward when you push on the trigger. You see that? And it touches that ball over there. And then this is what provides your final trigger pressure. So now I'm going to push on it, and if you see, those two edges are really sharp, sharp edges. They need to be really sharp and polished, and that's what dictates the smoothness of your trigger. So when I move back, they really on the edge there, and a little bit of pressure applied against that ball releases that lever, and then releases the hammer, obviously. So to adjust that screw, you basically adjust it from the front. You need the Allen wrenches with the ball types ends, like it came from the factory. Came with this tool set, and very nice. So you can adjust it, but the word of caution, there's a set screw here that holds this screw. So if you try to turn it, it will be really hard, and that's what holds it in place. What you need to do is rotate maybe half a turn or a turn before you're adjusting it. There's also a bronze insert that actually pushes on that screw. So loosen this screw a little bit before you turn the plunger. So adjust the plunger, making sure that it touches the ball and not releasing the trigger. Because if it's not touching the ball and releasing the trigger, then it doesn't affect your trigger at all, and you cannot set your pressure. So this is the first adjustment that I would make is so if I'll rotate it outwards, move it back counterclockwise, then as you see, it's not even touching it. So it doesn't play any role. So if you want to make it a single stage and really light, I mean, you can probably apply some of the pressure. If you want to increase the pressure now, the only way you can do it by moving that lever down, and this is that screw here. You would rotate it clockwise. You turn it in, and that moves that lever. That pushes on that lever here and moves it down, and that applies more force. If you want a single stage trigger, you move this plunger out, and you have now single stage smooth trigger. You don't know when it's gonna break. And travel you can adjust later, but this is how you can make it single stage. Now obviously you want to make it a double stage, so we're gonna move this screw back a little bit, and basically what we want to do is we want to make sure that it doesn't trigger. So one way to do it is to screw it in, and now I can touch it. I can move it easily with even applying a little bit of pressure, and doesn't trigger. So now I can move it. I try to move it back now counterclockwise until it triggers. So apply a little bit of pressure and waiting until it triggers. Basically, I'm applying the pressure to that ball, but not much, and trying to take this plunger out. Okay, so now it triggers. And now I can move it a little back. just a little bit. It doesn't require much. And this is where I found the most trouble. You really need to make sure that it touches the ball and not trigger the... So it touches the ball, and then a little bit of movement triggers it. So this is the first kind of a touchy adjustment here from my point, is you need to be able to touch that plunger ball and then apply a little bit of movement and trigger. And it feels like it's a little bit more than I want. And you have to rotate it just a slight little bit. That's a very touchy adjustment. That's the first one that I really spend time on. Okay, it's too much. It's really sometimes you wanna set screw, just push it a little bit of pressure, so it's not that easy to rotate that plunger. And then you need to rotate it in a little bit. This is where I found the most time I spent, is getting the plunger in the right position. Basically adjusting it just a little bit every time, and you'll find the spot where it touches the ball, like now, and then a little bit of pressure sets it off. So now I'm going to tighten this screw here, just slightly. Don't need to apply a lot of pressure, just a little bit. And verify that it's still in the same position. Obviously you could have moved it. Okay, looks like it's in the right position. And moves the ball a little bit. Okay, so this is set. Now the travel overall I can adjust with this screw here. So if I don't want that much travel, I can move it in. And now I have less travel. As you see, you can make it really, really short if you wanted to, but no need for that. But this is your travel. Maybe it's more than I want. So see how the first spring moves? It's because my adjustment, my release is not properly set. This is this screw, and that's okay. We're not worrying about that. We are working on the travel and overall trigger pressure. And like I said, you would need this tool. And once you set the plunger in the right position, you would need to use a smaller Allen wrench, like a really small one that doesn't come with the thing. I don't even know what size it is. If this 1.5, this must be 1 millimeter. Inside this plunger, there's a small screw. It's not easy to actually get to. You have to kind of bend it and get it in a position and try to push this in and make sure that you get into the screw itself. You don't want to strip it. So you want to get in here, and that springs sometimes are messing you up. From easy way to access that. But if I'll get in, then you can move up and down or in and out to adjust the pressure on that ball, and that's what would dictate your release pressure. So this is how you set the pressure. So once you set it, like I said, you can set your travel, you know, how much travel you have overall. So again, you don't worry about the first spring moving only. This is really will be the final movement. We're going to adjust it. And you can kind of adjust things at the same time. You can adjust a little bit here, make it don't travel that much. So this is it's releasing the trigger forward too much. So I need to adjust that screw back in. But not very tight, so it doesn't release my, it doesn't lock the release here. Okay, so basically engagement of your trigger should start moving that lever. If there's a play here, you can take this play out with this screw. So now as soon as you move the trigger, you see the lever moves. This is where you want to be. Just a little bit of slack we want to leave, but so this is the whole movement, and then a little bit of pressure on that ball, and that's what dictates your 2-pound pressure, releases the trigger. Okay, so let's say the travel is okay now. Let's adjust this front screw. This is the release of the trigger forward. What you can do, you can cock your gun, you can move that release plate forward to release the trigger. See how it moves back into its spot. But what you want to do is you want to actually make it tighter. So let's turn it clockwise a little bit more. And then if we release that trigger, now there's a gap. You will see there's a slight gap here between the lever and the release. So what you want to do, you want to now release this screw just a slightly bit until it gets into the place. So I'm gonna release it. And you hear the click that it got into its spot, but we need a little bit of gap here, just a little bit more. I would just make it like 15 degrees, just a little bit, so you just feel a little bit of slack, just a little bit of movement, really enough. Otherwise you might end up with the firing the shot and release trigger not in engaging the lever due to unburned powder got into that, you know, some dust and stuff like this. So you want to just leave just a little bit of space here. So that's, we release that screw a little bit, and now we good with the release. And now the back travel is that screw dictates the overall travel, but this screw dictates your dead travel. Means after you firing the shot, after it triggers, how much more it moves back. So even though I'm firing it, I can move it a little bit more back. And if you want to eliminate that, we will tighten this screw a little bit more. So let's say we'll rotate it the full 360 somewhat. Let's try it out. So it shouldn't fire, basically. Here's where we want to be, where it doesn't fire. It doesn't allow your trigger to move back, right? So we will release it a little bit, and basically we want to release it until we can fire it. And then we're going to just give it a little bit more. So you don't want to push against it. If this would be really tight, that means that you're not only going to apply the pressure to the ball, you're going to apply the pressure to that screw. So you're gonna screw up your trigger release weight. So now we have release, and it's not moving back, just really, you know, couple hairs there. So that's pretty much it. So and then overall tension. So this is not a release tension. The release tension is adjusted by the plunger internal screw, summing up the tension on those two springs. So if it's not enough, you can actually adjust it a little bit more by tightening this, by rotating this screw. You're basically moving the lever down. Now I can get it out. You're moving the lever, this lever down, and it provides more overall pressure on the first stage, and obviously it adds the pressure to a second stage. So this is a little bit more adjustments you can make. Either you can make all 2 pounds here and the really light weight on the first stage, so you can make the first stage very light, and then 2 pounds, let's say, or 1 kilogram on your second stage, or you can make the first stage be, you know, pretty tough, let's say a pound, and then it would be less tension on the plunger here. So anyway, it's a sum of those two things. You can adjust one or the other. Depends how you like it. So this is it. Now we have the adjusted trigger, and you know, you're trying it. If you don't like something, you know the travel is too much, because once you put the grip, the feel of the trigger changes. We're feeling it like this is not how you hold your gun when you're aiming. So once you put the grip on, you might say, it's a little bit too much travel, and you take it off and adjusting, and it's basically cycles of adjustments. But this is overall how do you kind of work with the trigger. Hopefully you'll find this helpful. Thank you.